Meanwhile, how does one fight with one hand tied and an eye blinded? That is pretty much the state of the Ukrainian military in the battlefield after the United States dealt it two crippling blows. First, by pausing its weapon aid, and now halting the flow of intelligence. And with the Russian forces launching fierce attacks across the country, our next report takes a closer look at how the American pause could not have come at a worse time for the Ukrainian forces.
The battlefield is shifting. Ukraine is fighting in the dark. With US intelligence cut off, its most powerful weapons are reduced to guesswork. Russian forces are advancing with overwhelming firepower, putting Ukrainian cities under siege, bombarding them with missiles and drones as Kyiv struggles to hold the line. Recent images from the front lines paint a grim picture. Russian artillery is striking with precision while Ukraine scrambles to respond. The munitions freeze is taking its toll, with Ukrainian stockpiles expected to run out in just a few weeks. But it is the loss of US intelligence that is an immediate disaster and has rendered Ukraine literally blind. For months, intelligence sharing between Washington and Kyiv has been critical, saving lives, guiding strikes and shifting the tide of war when it first sent HIMARS and M270 MLRs in 2022. At the time, Russian artillery was devastating Ukraine's defenses. But HIMARS, with its 500-kilometer range, turned the war by obliterating Russian ammo depots, forcing Moscow's forces to retreat from some front lines. Then came ATACMS, missiles with a 300-kilometer reach and a 500-kilogram payload, capable of striking deep into Russian combined territory. Airfields in Crimea, command centers in Donetsk, logistics hubs in Luhansk were all hit with devastating accuracy. But these weapons were never just about firepower. They relied on intelligence, satellite data, surveillance, electronic reconnaissance, all provided by the US. This is what made Ukraine's missile strikes lethal. And now that lifeline is gone. Without US intelligence, Ukraine's missile strikes are shots in the dark. Their precision weapons are now blunt instruments. Meanwhile, Russia, with its hypersonic missiles and superior surveillance, is gaining the upper hand. European allies are stepping up, pledging air defense systems, but they won't counter Russia's deadliest weapons. The reality is clear. Washington is using Ukraine's survival as a bargaining chip, and Kyiv is paying the price. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on Volodymyr Zelensky after stopping weapons aid. In yet another blow, the Trump administration halted the intelligence sharing with Kyiv, showing that there is no love lost between Trump and Zelensky. You saw it here on WION's live coverage, the unprecedented dressing down at the Oval Office. You saw what happened. Zelensky, who came to sign a deal with Trump, went back empty-handed and even on an empty stomach. The White House cancelled the lunch. Since then, Zelensky has publicly said he regrets the Oval Office incident. Now, it seems that the Trump administration is working quietly for the next phase. 4 senior members of Donald Trump's entourage have held secret discussions with some of Kyiv's top political opponents to Volodymyr Zelensky. In fact, the senior Trump allies held talks with the Ukrainian opposition leader, Yulia Tymoshenko. She is a former Prime Minister of Ukraine and senior members of the party of Petro Poroshenko, Zelensky's immediate predecessor as president. Now, Poroshenko and Timoshenko are confirming contact with Trump's team. According to American media reports, in fact, the discussions centered around whether Ukraine could hold quick presidential elections. Listen in to this statement from Trump, where he basically accused Zelensky of being a dictator without elections.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
You see, the Trump aides are confident that Zelensky would lose any vote due to war fatigue and also the public frustration over rampant corruption. However, the most recent polls showing Zelensky is still comfortably ahead in the race for the presidency, and that's significant. Although the official line from the Trump administration is that Trump is not interfering in Ukraine's domestic politics, but the Trump team's activities behind the scenes in Kyiv suggesting quite the opposite. And speaking of Trump's efforts, his team is hard at work and held direct talks with Ukraine on how to end the war. You heard that right. On Wednesday, Andriy Yermak, the head of the Ukrainian president's office, announced on his social media platform on Wednesday that he had discussed steps towards peace in a telephonic conversation with the U.S. National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. The conversation, by the way, came a day after the Ukrainian president said that Ukraine is ready to come to the talking table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Yermak has said that both sides discussed the next steps towards just and lasting peace. Remember, that is important for the Ukrainians. And they also exchanged views on security issues and the coordination of positions within the framework of the bilateral relations between Ukraine and the United States. He said that Ukrainian and U.S. teams are set to meet soon to, quote-unquote, continue this important work. But you see, this comes with the cost for Ukraine. On the same day, Waltz said that the United States is taking an active action to advance talks with Ukraine on the minerals deal and a potential peace deal with Russia. Washington views Zelensky's statement on Tuesday a very positive development, and according to the White House press secretary, U.S. National Security Council is also reconsidering funding for Ukraine. Remember, after that clash between Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office, the United States had put a pause on military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. And it seems that Trump has finally got what he wants. Ukraine to bow down to his terms and is finally ready to take the peace talks forward, especially after that dramatic clash between the two leaders. Zelensky's statement has also been welcomed by European leaders, by the way, with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz hailing the Ukrainian leaders' willingness to negotiate with Russia. The British Prime Minister, meanwhile, also said on Wednesday that he was doing everything he could to help repair the U.S.-Ukraine ties. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, is considering a visit, in fact, to the United States with Zelensky and Starmer to meet Donald Trump. So clearly a lot is going on. The question is, will this pave the way for ending the Ukraine war finally? Of course, it's too soon to say at this point, but what is evident is that Ukraine cannot continue to fight this war alone anymore. Just look at the battleground updates. All this talk of peace has not slowed down the fighting. On Wednesday, Russia claimed to have taken control of yet another settlement in Ukraine. Its forces captured a settlement in Privolnoye. This is located in Ukraine's Donetsk region. And across the Ukrainian front line in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson and Kharkiv, heavy fighting is underway. On Thursday morning, Russian shelling hit the Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk in Donetsk. At least 2 people were injured as a result of the shelling, and the local authorities said Russia shelled industrial zones and civilian infrastructure in the city, and that the aerial bombs destroyed a warehouse and caused a massive fire. Various regions of Ukraine have come under Russian attack since Wednesday night. According to the Air Force, Russian forces fired 112 Shahed and decoy drones as well as 2 ballistic Iskander missiles at Ukraine from Wednesday night into Thursday. Ukrainian forces claim to have destroyed 68 drones while 43 were jammed. This comes as European Union leaders are holding emergency summit talks in Brussels to discuss protection tactics for Ukraine as Europe faces the prospect of the United States cutting it adrift. On the same day, 2 people were injured in a Russian drone attack on a Kharkiv residential neighborhood. Emergency services posted video footage showing workers rescuing the people from a residential block in front of which many cars were heavily damaged by the rubble. Elsewhere in Ukraine, to be specific, Kryvyi Rih, Russian missile attack killed 2, injuring 7. Ukrainian troops are also fighting Moscow's troops in the Russian territory of Kursk, of course. The Ukrainian Air Force, missile troops, artillery units attacked Russian targets such as personnel, concentration areas of weapons, military equipment and ammunition depots. Clearly, the war has reached a very crucial point, and an end to the fighting is the only way forward, perhaps. But again, at what cost and for whom? The answer to those questions is very significant, but it's also an answer that Ukraine is not going to like. As far as Russia is concerned, it looks like they have the last laugh. On Thursday, the Kremlin said that the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's view that the Ukraine war is a proxy war between the United States and Russia is in line with the Russian President Vladimir Putin's own assessment. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, and I'm quoting here, so it is absolutely in line with the position that our president and foreign minister have repeatedly expressed. We have said this repeatedly, and yes, we agree that it is time to stop this conflict and this war, quote unquote. You see, Russia has firmly rejected proposals for a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine, and Moscow is dismissing suggestions of a 1-month halt in fighting or a cessation of aerial and naval attacks. These ideas were being floated by Ukraine, France, Britain, and Russia says that firm agreements on a final settlement are required. Without all of that, some kind of respite is absolutely unacceptable.